Okay, I think we are live. Are we live? Yes, we're live. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon from Turkey. Hi, Claire. Hello.
Hi from Sao Paulo.
How are you doing, Claire?
Really well, Cecilia. Thanks so much for having me on.
It's an honor. Thank you. Thank you for accepting. So we are live streaming this from Zoom. We have some lovely participants here, and using the Facebook group as well. So thank you so much, Claire. And this live is supported by Freed. You're going to I'm going to post a summary and the video recording on Freed. So check it out. It's free of charge. It's freely available. So check it out later. Okay, Claire. So and if you have questions, everyone, please type it in the comments, and we'll try our best to address them. Okay. So
Okay.
Claire, can you introduce, I know lots of people know you, you're very famous, you are a young learner queen, but some people still don't know you. So can you introduce yourself to these people?
Of course. I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who have never heard of me. So if you aren't familiar
How
with
come?
my work, no, if you're not familiar with my work, I invite you to join my teaching community, Active English, over on Instagram or Facebook. We are a group of young learner teachers. We're dedicated to transforming the way we teach English to children. I myself have been dedicated to ELT for almost 2 decades now. And over the years, I think I've done lots of different things. I've worked with many different areas. I'm a writer. I am a teacher trainer. I was a director of studies at actually Oxford TEFL over in Spain. I moved to Brazil in 2011, and since then I've been involved in the design and implementation of bilingual programs in different parts of the country. I'm an active member of our National Teachers Association. But first and foremost, I am and always will love being a young learner teacher. That's, I think, where I am at my best.
It's your passion, right?
Yeah, that is, and that's actually what I'm here to talk about today.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, Claire. So we've got some questions for you. The first one is we did a survey in our Facebook group. And,
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Were you surprised with the most ranked question, the topic?
Well, the topic of today, essential routines for the physically distanced classroom. I wasn't really surprised when that one won, although there were lots of really other good options too. I think, and the reason, this is why, Cecilia, this is why I wasn't so surprised that this one won, is because it really reflects, I think, what I've been hearing from the teachers in the active English teaching community: classroom management. Classroom management is and always has been the biggest challenge for young learner teachers. And in fact, when I did my diploma with Oxford TEFL, my research project was in preparing young learner teachers, or preparing teachers for the young learner classroom. And the overwhelming number of people who I interviewed named classroom management as the number one challenge that they had. What was interesting about this, though, is that it wasn't just newly qualified teachers. It was teachers with 5 or more years experience as well saying the same thing. So, you know, from that we can see that even though things or teaching may be dramatically different now to what it was before the pandemic, every teacher knows that without solid classroom management skills, none of those wonderful activities that we plan work out. Your lesson aims tend to go out the window, your stress levels rise, and this can really lead to teacher burnout, Cecilia, which is something that's really serious. So no, I wasn't surprised that this was the winner, that people want to hear about this topic.
And especially the challenges that teachers have been facing in the past year, right?
Yeah.
So, I didn't see that as a surprise either.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me just see if they will have more questions in a minute in the comments. And Claire, how do routines contribute to effective classroom management? So you've mentioned that, right? It
Right.
can
Classroom
make or
management
break it. Yeah,
routines. What's this
yeah.
connection? Right, right. Okay,
How
well,
does it link?
good question. I should really be clear about that. Routines for me are one of the pillars of an effective classroom management system, right? If we stop thinking about classroom management as being a set of techniques that we use, but think of it as a whole system, this is something
Right.
that I learned from Lillian Montalvan. She has this idea that it's not just sort of one set of tools that we use for classroom management. It is this whole system. Routines are one of the pillars of your
Right.
classroom management system. And if you have a look at mainstream education, Cecilia, it's an incredibly important part of mainstream education.
Yeah,
And
for all
I think
ages, students of
for
all
all
ages.
ages.
Hmm.
And it's even more important in the physically distanced language classroom. And this is why. Um, Routines help children feel secure and sure of what to do, even if they don't understand everything that you're saying at the beginning. So this is where it's a bit different to a classroom with L1. You
Hmm.
know, children will not understand your instructions as well at the beginning, and it is the routine that will support their understanding. So this
Absolutely.
sense of security that you're giving them through your routine really helps to lower anxiety. And as we know, that lower level of stress and anxiety in the learner, and this is for adults as well, helps them interpret the language from context much more
Yeah.
easily. And also when used consistently, routines do provide space for language to grow. So I think it's incredibly relevant to your classroom management.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And I have another question here. Before we get into the suggestions, right, that
Yeah.
teachers are going to make, um, maybe you could define what you mean by routine. Are they rules? How do you define
Ah,
routine?
yes. Okay, that's probably a really good idea if I stop right now and really make sure we're all on the same page with this, because I think for some people, um, it might sound like I'm sort of saying do the same thing every day, but it's not quite that. What I
Right,
mean by routine is teachers following a specific order of classroom events and procedures, so
right.
that learners get these clear cues for what behavior is expected of them at different times. So, you know, what's expected of them at circle time, what is
Right.
expected of them when we sit down at our desks and maybe do some book work, or what is expected when we're in the playground.
Hmm.
And you
Would
know
you
what
say,
I've
for
noticed?
example, when teachers, sorry to interrupt, when
No,
teachers
no.
welcome students by the door, would you say that this is part of a routine?
How you do it, this is really interesting. Young learner teachers are so focused on the what they're going to do. So, oh, I'm going to do a greeting at the door, that they often forget how important it is to decide how they're going to do it. So this is where the routine and procedures become so essential. How are you going to greet them at the door? And
Hmm.
when you do greet them, what are you going to say?
Hmm.
And how will you then transition them into the classroom or transition them to the next activity? How will you get their attention? How will you give instructions?
Right.
Having a routine means carefully considering and planning the procedures and steps that are taken so that you can actually get through your planned activities. And that is something which I think is so important for teachers, young learner teachers especially, to start thinking of. It's very different to teaching adults. When you teach
Yeah.
adults and you give adults instructions, they're going to follow through with them. It's very rare that you have sort of the same kinds of classroom management problems where if a child doesn't understand what the instructions were, they're not
Hmm.
likely to put up their hand and say, I don't understand. They're likely to find something more interesting to do in
That's
your
true.
classroom.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
really disruptive.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
that's focusing on your routine is going to save you a lot of heartache, I think.
Hmm. Yeah. Wonderful. Let me just check if we have questions in our. If you teachers here on Zoom, if you have questions, please feel free to ask
Please
us.
do.
Okay. And let me just see. Okay, not yet. And let me carry on with the other questions. Okay. Um, okay, so Claire, this year we've seen
Mm,
many schools, yeah, return to face-to-face classes,
yes.
but things certainly aren't back the way they were pre-pandemic. Yeah, the era pre-pandemic.
Yes.
So the new challenge is teaching in a physically distanced classroom. Okay,
Uh-huh.
what changes? Okay, what routines do you think are the most critical to teach students?
Yeah,
We
this is
have
a
to
really good
change
question.
our behavior, the how to do things. What's
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Cecilia, this is really the main part of today's live with you, is that what I want to talk about really is about ensuring the safety and well-being of everyone in the classroom.
hmm
And of course, to facilitate the work of the teacher, we need new types of routines and agreements. We need to establish these with the students, and they need to be reinforced on a daily basis until
right?
everyone's used to them. And I'm getting so many messages. Last night, I was spent a long time talking to a teacher who is really struggling with this. This is serious. And it's not that she doesn't have great ideas for her lesson. It's that it's very overwhelming with all of these
Imagine, I can
new rules and procedures that teachers
protocols and
need,
everything.
protocols, and this
Yeah.
fear as well that we have of teachers having to go back to the classroom and putting their health at risk and the health of their
Yeah,
students and their
absolutely.
students' families. So
Yeah.
I want to start first and foremost with these teachers in my community in mind. I want to start by talking about routines for the teacher's health and well-being. No one's talking
Right.
about this and how important it is.
That's mhm.
Every day teachers need high levels of physical and emotional energy if they're going to successfully connect with students and help their students connect and help them learn. That there's evidence-based research on this.
Mhm.
So when working in a physically distanced classroom, it's essential that teachers and school coordinators, school management teams make teacher health and well-being a priority. But what can a
Absolutely.
teacher do to help themselves? Are you looking after yourself, Cecilia?
Well, I'm teaching fully online now, so I don't have to worry about that. But yeah,
But was that
I
something
am.
that you had to take into consideration when you first went online? Because it is also, I think, a big priority for people who are working remotely,
Yeah,
spending hours in front of the computer
sure,
every
sure.
day.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I am.
Um,
I am taking
I'm
care of
glad you are. I'm glad you
myself.
are. Here are some suggestions for preparing yourself for working with children in a physically distanced classroom. Number one is make sure that you've invested in a mask that's comfortable even after hours of use. So you're going to be using a mask all day long. You need to make sure it's comfortable, even if you're switching the mask up
Right.
as you should be.
Yeah.
Make sure that it's a comfortable mask that isn't always falling down, that the
hmm
material is appropriate. You need to also, this is a big one, protect your voice using vocal warm ups and breathing techniques
Oh,
and drinking plenty of water.
this I don't do. We have to.
Well,
Yeah, something that we
it's
overlook, right?
I think it's become, teachers have always had a really big problem with their most valuable instrument is your
hmm
voice. And
Absolutely.
teachers have notoriously been damaging their voices since forever.
Yeah.
But now with teachers wearing masks and face shields, they are straining their voice even worse. And by Wednesday, Thursday, and forget Friday, teachers are losing their voices.
They lose
And
their voices. Yeah,
yeah,
I can imagine.
actually on my Instagram account, I did a live with somebody who is like an expert on this, two experts actually, one who's a voice coach and one who is a speech therapist. So do check out their advice over there. I think the next piece of advice I want to suggest is staying active, eating well, and getting enough rest.
hmm
Sounds obvious, but how many of us actually do that, like make
Yeah,
that part of our routine?
that's
They're
right.
pillars. They're pillars for physical and mental health. And that's exactly what we need right now. Um, I think this next one is easier said than done, but it needs to be said. You need to learn to minimize and control these feelings of anxiety and stress. So there's lots of ways that you can do that: meditation, mindfulness, journaling, whatever works for you. But
hmm
get on top of that. Don't wait until you're burnt out to seek some kind of help. Start start thinking about that now and make it part of your routine. And then, of course, the last one, I think everyone's going to agree with me of how important it is to set working hours and stick to them. So when
Right.
it's time to end your day, take that time off. Find time at the weekend for you. Say no to things when you need to. Set boundaries. You need to do this, and you need to do this without feeling guilty. It's essential. I'm going to say it again. teacher well-being and incorporating routines for teacher well-being into your everyday life is essential right now. So
Yeah.
that's my advice for routines
Wonderful.
for teachers. Now, let's talk about routines for students now, yeah?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
Absolutely.
so planning routines. You are going to need to plan these routines. You're going to need to introduce them to the students. And just a little disclaimer, don't feel discouraged if they don't go smoothly at the beginning, okay? I need to say this now. You know, don't try them out once and come back to me and say, Claire, they didn't work. With repetition and consistency, the children are going to pick up and become familiar with these routines.
Yeah,
So
like you said in the beginning, right, in our chat, yes.
yeah,
The
yeah,
consistency and
yes. It's not going to happen overnight, but eventually it will, and it's going to make your life easier.
yeah,
So for all of you working in the physically distanced classroom, here are some really useful routines for you to establish in your lessons. Okay. First one are the personal hygiene routines.
very important. Yeah.
This is, I'm not going to get into which specific ones because this will vary according to the legislation and the rules have been set by your local government and your school. So whatever, find out what they are, obviously, and make sure that when you're introducing these routines, make them part of your lesson, right? Model and motivate hygiene procedures regularly. Especially, this is a good one, when students are leaving learning spaces or coming back from lunch break or coming back from the toilet
Bathroom.
or
Yeah.
arriving, make sure that you've got specific routines in place and you've showed them what they need to do.
Right.
And that's something that an English teacher probably never had to worry about before. Now we absolutely do. Procedures for preventing students from sharing potentially contaminated toys and other objects.
Right.
So what a lot of teachers are doing successfully is creating and teaching a system. So you played with it, you touched it. Here's our tray for items that are dirty. All of those items go into that tray, and we have another tray or a box with items and objects that are clean and can be taken for individual use. So setting up and teaching a system like that is going to make sure that you're keeping everyone safe and protected.
Wonderful.
Yeah, it's a really practical idea, I think, that's very easy to implement and teach. You can also teach them, you can also put marks on the floor. This is for children don't have any clue about physical spatial awareness. It's really something very difficult even for a lot of adults that I know,
Yeah.
the whole physical
Yeah.
distance and
Yeah.
space. So another idea for helping children become aware of this, a routine that you can have, is have marks on the floor. So you're going to have a circle
With
time
their
moment.
names, you mean? With their
That
names.
would be a great idea. It could be color coded. It could just be little stickers on the floor so that they know how far apart they need to be sitting at circle time. It needs to be a routine. You can make it a fun game as well. So you
can
can
draw maybe an animal or something, yeah, to make it more fun, right?
Cecilia, am I going to convince you to start teaching kids?
No, thank you. Just have a
It's a
good
great
idea.
idea that you just had, though. You
Yeah.
could sort of say, Cecilia, the elephant, and Cecilia has to run and find the elephant, and that's where she's going to sit. Lots of fun ways to make this routine more child friendly.
Right.
Remove some of the fear as well. You know, if it's
Yeah.
fun, then it just becomes part of our daily lives rather than something to be feared.
And what about the older children, Claire? The ones who don't sit during circle time, for example.
Excellent. So, for example, if you're working with older children, a really nice lesson idea that you can use is actually to have a lesson about spatial awareness. And a really nice lesson idea that I think might work for older children, which incorporates, if we're having a look at sort of language goals here, we're incorporating numbers, incorporating distance, incorporating making estimates, language for guessing, would be exploring this idea of 2 meters. How far do you think 2 meters is?
That's
What can we find in the room that is 2 meters? What can we use to measure 2 meters? And just exploring this idea of of distance, and then incorporating it into bringing that into your routine. So, well, now you know what 2 meters are is. Make sure you're staying 2 meters
Yeah.
apart.
Very.
um, yeah, there's a lot of agreements and strategies that you can use, or procedures rather, that you can use during activities that involve movement.
Mm-hmm.
um, and during transitions, I think, like, by transitions I mean um, you're going from outside to inside, or you're lining up to leave the classroom, or you're
Mm-hmm.
asking children to go and get their books and then sit back down at the table,
Yeah.
or you're asking them to move to sit in groups.
Yeah.
Any kind of classroom activity that involves movement can be potentially disastrous in a regular classroom. But now with physical distancing, it's really important for you to think extra carefully about how you're going to organize this movement. And this is what I think teachers aren't planning. They're going, well, I'm going to do this activity and then I'm going to put them in groups. How on earth are you going to get them
Yeah.
from point A to point B in a safe, secure way? So think very carefully about how you're going to be doing that. And of course, other procedures like handing out and collecting classroom material. In the past, we'd use a classroom helper perhaps to do that. Now we need to
Yeah.
think about, how safe is it? How can I collect and hand out materials? So those are, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, that was 5 different procedures that
Mm-hmm.
teachers need to be planning carefully.
Wonderful. Yeah. We have some more questions here, Claire.
Great.
Res is asking how to keep students motivated in class while, still having to be physically distant
Right.
from their peers.
Right. It is hard. Um, and I'm not going to pretend that it's not. I'm not going to pretend that this is something that teachers are sort of finding easy, especially if you're working with the little ones. I'm curious to know the age of this person's students, because motivation, I think, will differ, or how to motivate students will differ greatly depending on the age of your learners. Um, for the younger ones, while he's answering, I'll try and
Yeah, I'm gonna ask him.
cover everyone. While, for the younger students, I think that the desire to be close to and touch, and this physical closeness that a lot of cultures have naturally, is proving to be quite challenging for teachers, because it's hard to keep them apart. It's hard to be saying
Yeah.
all day
They
long,
want to
keep
hug you, they want to kiss you, right?
and each
Kiss their
other. They want to
friends.
play
Yeah,
with each
yeah,
other. They want to play
yeah,
with their friends, and it's quite heartbreaking to be that teacher who's sort of saying, keep apart, keep apart. What we can do for these little ones is have a conversation with them about what this means, what the new situation, find out what they understand about the situation, and then introduce all of these new protocols, procedures, and routines in the funnest way possible.
but
Make it like
in an
without
honest way,
fear, in
right,
an
Claire?
honest
It's,
way.
you have to be honest, right? Not pretending
Yeah,
that. Okay.
not pretending that we're doing
Yeah,
this just for fun and games,
yeah,
but
I
trying to,
understand.
but not instilling fear
Hmm.
either.
Sure.
Um, they're getting probably a lot of that at home and from listening and hearing the news in the background and adults talking. And we don't need to bring fear into our classrooms. If we have a look at this concept of Maslow before we bloom, hashtag Maslow before we bloom, you will see a lot of people are talking about the importance of Maslow's hierarchy being the priority right now before we look at any kind of Bloom's taxonomy academic
Hmm.
objectives. So by focusing on making sure children have their basic needs attended to and that they feel safe and cared for, needs to be your priority, and routines fall straight into that category. So
Yeah.
making sure that that children feel safe when they're at school,
Hmm.
looking carefully at how introducing these routines and procedures. I don't know whether this is actually related to motivation, but making sure that these routines are a fun part of their day is certainly going to help keep them motivated. And I think a lot of the motivation is going to then come from the kind of content that you're planning. And we could do
Right.
another entire session on how to motivate children through your lesson plans.
Yeah.
But certainly, unless you have good routines, it doesn't matter what you plan, because it's not going to work out. So
Right.
make sure that you have your routines and procedures in place and
Yeah.
working well, and then we can talk about how to get them
Yeah.
motivated.
Rez answered. He said 16 to 18, so they are teenagers.
Okay, so teenagers is a completely different kettle of fish. Luckily for you, well,
Do you think it's
hopefully,
easier though, Claire?
It's
Yeah.
a lot easier. It
Uh-huh.
is a lot easier, because you can talk with them on a completely different level. Yeah. But motivating teenagers is something that you can, um, yeah, that you can, it's a whole nother session, I think.
Yeah, we have to set another one. Yeah. Okay. Another question here, Claire. Could you share some effective ideas to engage young learners into online classes?
Sure,
Um,
certainly, absolutely. The first suggestions that I'm going to make about teaching children online is that you need to recognize that you can't do the same thing that you used to. We've been in this context for a long time now, so I'm going to assume that everyone feels quite comfortable with using the technology, the platforms, the digital
mhm,
tools that you can incorporate into your lessons. But one thing has not changed, Cecilia, and that is lessons that connect with and respect children's developmental needs and interests are the lessons that are going to be the most successful. So if you are working without a course book, it's a lot easier because you can personalize your lessons to the needs of these students. And we're going beyond the lexical objectives that you have and
yeah.
first connecting with what they're interested in, what motivates them intrinsically, and then you can plan your lesson around that and think then in second place, think about what are the language goals that will help me meet these needs. So that's something that I talk about a lot in Lesson Planning from the Heart, which is actually a webinar I'm going to give on Monday. So I recommend that you come
Wonderful.
along and listen in more detail to what I'm going to talk about on Monday. I'll link you up to that webinar for
Yeah.
sure,
Yeah.
so you can
That's
join. But
wonderful.
that's, I think there's a lot of other activities that we can do, and I'm going to tell you a little story. Do we have time for this? I hope
Yeah.
so.
Yeah. We do. Yeah. Sure.
Really quick story about something that I learned about online learning from my son.
Your
He was
son, how
having
old is he now? Is he 10,
he's,
11?
yeah, he's just turned
Yeah.
11. Yeah, he's a big boy
Gorgeous
now.
son.
So he was struggling terribly
with
with the
with the
online
online
learning,
lessons. Mm.
just not engaged at all. And I was trying to get him to get off the screen and start doing things on his own. And I said, it's Aloy, you've got to get off the screen. All he wanted to do was play video games, and it was like, you've got to get off the screen. And we sort of negotiated this, and he was like, oh, there's nothing to do. And I said, you've got a whole room full of toys. Go and choose a toy. And I picked up this Rubik's Cube, and I said, you've got 3 of these, and you don't even know how to solve it. I said, go and work this out. And he goes, well, I'm going to need to use a YouTube video, because he was trying to get back on the screen. Very clever,
Right.
very clever.
Yes.
And I
Yeah.
said, okay, you can use your iPad to learn, but you have to learn how to use the Rubik's Cube. And off he went. And Cecilia, in 2 days, not spending the whole day, but like by day 2 of doing
Yeah.
these sort of sessions, he had taught himself,
Really.
and he can now do it in under 2 minutes.
Wow.
He
Wow.
is, and you know what that taught me? It
Mhm.
taught me that children, when they are interested in what they're learning, they can learn, and they can learn independently. So we can take advantage of that characteristic that children have, that this genuine curiosity and desire to
They're
learn
so
about certain
curious.
things.
They ask
And if,
everything.
and if we can connect our lessons to what they're interested in, for me, online lessons aren't even the most important thing. What happens is we need to get them so excited to learn something on their own that after their lesson, they're off and away. So one of the advantages, and you talk a lot about this, Cecilia, one of the advantages of having these sort of online lessons is that we can set up these synchronous and asynchronous moments. We can have this online learning platform where you're leaving extra material, or you're getting them to post
Important.
stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. To strike
Make
a balance. Yeah.
Exactly, and to give them opportunities to become more autonomous learners, and to chase what it is that they're interested in. So
Hmm.
that for me is at the heart of what a good, not online lesson is about, but an approach to teaching children online should be, using these live moments to get them so interested or curious, or give them input on the language that they need to go and do something after class.
Hmm. Hmm. Wonderful. And I have an extra question, Claire.
Shoot.
How can how can we prepare students to? Because I know that some children are still learning online, right?
They
They are not.
are.
They are not in the classroom, which I think is a mistake. But this is another thing. um, how can we prepare students to eventually move back to the classroom environment? Because this will happen, hopefully soon, safely. So do you have any suggestions for teachers who, for example, who know that pretty soon they will have to teach face to face, or in a month's time, or in some weeks? So
Yeah, start following teachers online who are
mhm,
already doing it. You
great.
know, reach out to your community, get support from people who have got this practical experience, who have made lots of mistakes, and you can learn from them.
Yeah.
And Maslow before we bloom. I think that's going to be my mantra for as long as I need to say it. I'm going to say focus on the effective needs of these students, because they're not going to learn anything if they're not feeling secure and safe and cared for. And that needs to be the number one priority as we transition back to a face-to-face environment. But here's another thing as well that I'm going to suggest. Just because we're going back to, hopefully transitioning back to being in a physical space with kids again, why does that mean we need to completely abandon everything that we've learned about online learning? Isn't this an opportunity to not go back to doing the same old thing that we always did, but look at what
Absolutely.
is wonderful about online learning and incorporate that? And it's kind of,
In
you
our
know,
physical lessons, right?
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, it's time for us to change what we're doing, Cecilia,
Yeah,
and now
absolutely.
better than ever.
Yeah, great, wonderful. Okay, so let me check if we have more questions. I don't think so. There are lots of likes and hearts and
Oh,
thank you so much. Thank you so much, Claire. Do you want to finish off? Do you want to
well,
have
I
a
just want to
final
finish off.
say here?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on,
My
Cecilia, to talk
pleasure.
about this. It's really nice to be connecting with a new community. I have mentioned that I'm on Instagram building up a community of young learner teachers who are transforming the way that we teach English to children. And I've mentioned that on Monday I'm giving a webinar. So let's stay connected.
Yeah.
Feel free to
Can you?
reach out
I'm
and
going
talk
to
to me.
leave the links and the your Instagram handle and the link to your webinar later on. But yeah,
Thanks very
I think
much.
yes, it would be great, and it's wonderful. As I told you, Claire, we don't usually. Well, I feel that we in our group we don't usually talk too much about young learners, because I don't feel confident in talking about it, because as I've said before, I don't teach children, and I think it's a great opportunity to talk to an expert and a teacher at heart, like yourself. So thank you so much. It was a
Oh,
pleasure.
it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much,
Goodbye,
everyone,
everyone.
and see you soon. Thank you, Claire. Bye bye,
Bye.
everyone.